It was one of Arizona's most notorious murders.
It was Fatal Attraction in real life.
There's religion, there's sex. They found him naked, bloodied.
And her trial would captivate the nation.
It turns into a TV event.
It became a real-life soap opera.
You just can't stop watching.
And now, in a special 2-episode event, Snap takes you inside the story of Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. Their passionate beginning.
I think about having sex with you every day.
Travis's bloody end.
27 stab wounds, a slit throat, and a gunshot to the head.
The relentless investigation.
There's so much evidence in that house. So much. And it all points to you.
And the gripping trial that would all hinge on one familiar question.
Couldn't it also be that after everything they went through in that relationship, that after that, she simply snapped?
Mesa, Arizona, June 9th, 2008. It was around 10:30 that Monday night when Mimi Hall and several friends dropped by Travis Alexander's 4,000 square foot suburban home, searching for the successful sales representative with prepaid legal services. Days earlier, Travis had invited Mimi along for one of the perks of his success, a free trip to Mexico.
Prepaid Legal was taking their top executives to Cancun for a vacation, and Travis was on the list.
But as their departure date approached, Travis had mysteriously disappeared.
She hadn't heard from him and was getting worried because their trip was in a few hours.
He's not answering his phone. He missed a couple of very crucial appointments.
The night before we were to fly to Cancun, his voicemail box was completely full, and I knew something was wrong at that point.
Mimi thought so too. So that night, only hours before their flight, she had gathered up several of Travis's mutual friends and gone to check on the 30-year-old.
She felt she had to go to his house and find out what's going on.
At the house, Mimi and her friends found one of Travis's roommates.
Travis's roommate says he's in Cancun. He's been gone on vacation. She says, no, he's not. He's supposed to leave with me tomorrow.
Worried, Mimi asked if they could check Travis's room.
They're immediately struck by this odd scent, this rancid smell.
When they opened the door to Travis's bedroom, the stench became overpowering.
They see blood on the floor, sheets off the bed, and one light shining from the direction of the bathroom.
And inside the attached bath, the friends found the horrifying source of the odor. Travis.
They found him naked, bloodied, crumpled up in the shower.
Moments later, Travis's friends dialed 911.
What's going on?
A friend of ours is dead in his bedroom.
How did this happen? Do you have any idea?
No, we have no idea. Everyone's been wondering about him for a few days.
But while Travis's friends couldn't say how he died or how long he'd been dead, they did have something to give the authorities. A name.
Has he been threatened by anyone recently?
Yes, he has. Okay. He has an ex-girlfriend that's been bothering him, and her name is Jodi.
Born in 1980. By all accounts, Jodi Arias had an idyllic childhood in Salinas, California.
You know, playing in their cul-de-sac, riding bikes, climbing trees.
She loved to draw and paint. She was always very good at art. And, you know, as a kid, she showed a lot of promise in that regard.
She was always infatuated with photography. From a young age, she would pick up a camera and shoot photos of everything around her.
She was less interested in school, however. And by age 17, she had dropped out and was on her own.
Jodi's relationship with her parents was always very fragmented. Jodi was always very distant with her family, and especially her mom.
She was a little bit of a rebel as a teenager, as many teens are. But she really took it to a higher degree than most teens.
She dropped out of high school, actually, and moved in with her boyfriend at the time.
Jodi spent the next several years drifting across Southern California, bouncing from boyfriend to boyfriend and job to job.
took some community college classes, tried to get into photography, did some wedding shoots here and there, but her photography business never really took off.
Instead, it was mostly restaurant work that paid the bills.
She was a professional waitress, had worked at least 10 different waitress jobs.
And by 2006, it looked as if the 26-year-old waitress was running out of options.
She had no money. She couldn't keep a job.
But then a friend told her about a company called Prepaid Legal Services.
Prepaid Legal is a service that provides you for a monthly fee affordable legal representation.
More important for Jodi, they were always hiring salespeople.
It's sort of a multi-layer marketing business, much like Amway.
Jodi quickly signed on.
She was never one of the top performers.
She was just making an extra few $100 a month.
But while Jodi wasn't making much money, she was making connections. In September of 2006, at a sales conference in Las Vegas, Jodi even hooked up with a real climber in the company, a hotshot salesman named Travis Alexander. Also a California native, Travis's early years had been horrific.
His parents were drug addicts, addicted to methamphetamines.
Would go on methamphetamine binges for days at a time, come home and crash for days more.
He wasn't fed. Lice and roaches all over, and it was just a terrible life for a little boy.
But when he was 10, his grandparents took Travis and his siblings in, and his life took a complete 180.
His grandmother brought him into the Mormon faith and really became a huge influence in his life. So Travis, as he grows up, really starts to overcome these odds that he was faced with as a child.
By the time he met Jodi Arias in 2006, Travis had become a leader in the church.
Travis Alexander was very involved in the Mormon church, led ward meetings.
He had accomplished so much, and he was a great example to us in so many ways.
He was a very, very unique and powerful personality.
But mostly, Travis used his powerful personality to become one of Prepaid Legal's most successful salespeople ever.
He had a beautiful 4,000 square foot home, BMW, and a lifestyle of a rock star.
The company was grooming him for even bigger things, too.
He was a motivational speaker within the company, really going to seminars and conferences and teaching people how to become better salespeople, to be better people. He was a very inspirational figure.
He was the guy that brightened the room when he walked in, and he was the guy that was just the life of the party. Everybody knew Travis's reputation.
In fact, Travis's growing status with the company was how he met Jodi at Prepaid Legal's annual sales conference in Vegas. It was the day before one of the main events of the conference, a lavish dinner for executive directors. And Travis had a problem.
Travis did not have a date.
And while he was trying to line someone up, a coworker came up with a solution, an attractive new hire from California.
He called her and asked her to be his date.
Jodi readily accepted.
She knew he was someone that was influential.
And that night, outside a hotel banquet hall, the couple met for the first time.
I was standing with Travis in line to get into the event when she came walking through the crowd, and, he was quite thrilled with her.
Jodi seemed pretty thrilled with Travis, too.
That first night that they met, they hung out till about 4 o'clock in the morning.
The relationship didn't stay in Vegas, however. Once they parted after the conference, the couple remained in almost constant contact.
Travis lived in Mesa, Arizona, and Jodi was in Palm Desert. And they would meet on the weekend and then communicate during the week over the phone, text, emails.
And despite the distance between them, Jodi's feelings for Travis intensified with every text, every email, and every long-awaited weekend they spent together.
Jodi's just really fascinated by this young man, this attractive, successful, accomplished entrepreneur.
As for Travis, the thrill he felt when Jodi first walked up to him outside the banquet hall showed signs of growing into something more.
Travis finally found someone that he's really into.
She was attractive, articulate, well-spoken, and Travis seemed to really like her.
But while a daily dose of texts and phone calls allowed them to carry on an intense long-distance relationship, miles weren't the only thing dividing the couple. There was also Travis's Mormon faith.
Travis made it very clear to her early on that he did not want a serious relationship with anyone who was not LDS.
So on November 26, 2006, only 2 months after meeting Travis, Jodi was baptized into the Mormon Church.
We asked Travis, is she doing this for you? Is she sincere about this? And he goes, oh, no, this is what she wants.
Travis apparently wanted it too. Not only was he happy that Jodi converted, he assisted with the ceremony.
He was standing in a font at the front of the church and dipped her into the water, completed the ceremony, and she became a member of the Mormon Church.
And by February of 2007, the pair was officially a couple. Jodi was still based in California, but she regularly made the long drive to Arizona in order to spend time with Travis.
They traveled extensively. We see lots and lots of pictures of them in all sorts of places.
They were a beautiful couple. Fun, energetic.
And if what Travis told his friends was any indication, Jodi was especially energetic in the bedroom.
Travis Alexander would tell friends that he believed she was actually a nymphomaniac, that she couldn't get enough.
Jodi's philosophy on how you attract a man closer to you is you give him more sexually.
However, despite their hot and heavy romance, there were signs that the newly baptized Jodi was far more serious about their relationship than Travis.
She was looking for a husband.
To her, Travis was it.
She told lots of friends that she wanted to have babies with Travis.
Travis, on the other hand, told his friends something very different.
Travis was enamored with her looks, but it was more lust, not love.
He enjoyed their relationship, but he wasn't serious about her long term.
He wasn't ready to commit.
At least not to Jodi.
He was looking for a woman that says no, not until marriage.
He wanted someone that was chaste and pure and was an ideal Mormon, and Jodi was never going to be that.
And by the end of June, after only 5 months of dating, Jodi's brief romance with Travis had come to an end.
She wanted to be the one, and he obviously didn't see her as the one.
The break wouldn't be a clean one, however. And that was why, when they found Travis dead, his friends immediately thought of Jodi. Coming up, Travis's friends have a disturbing tale for the police.
His tires were slashed. He was being followed.
And according to his friends, the stalker was Jodi.
Once found her hiding behind his Christmas tree.
On June 9th, 2008, friends of Travis Alexander found the successful young businessman and motivational speaker dead in his Mesa, Arizona home.
They find his bloated, decomposed body in the shower and immediately call police.
His roommate just went in there and said there's lots of blood.
That was no exaggeration, based on what the police found when they arrived on the scene moments later.
The detectives see blood spatter on the floors, the walls, the mirrors, the sink. They see blood drops as far as 6 feet up on the slats of the blinds.
That scene was one of the most horrific, gory, bloody crime scenes that one could imagine.
Travis's injuries were just as horrific.
He was stabbed several times from behind. His throat had been slit from ear to ear.
Defensive wounds, slash marks on his hands, really deep cuts into the tender skin of his palms.
He had also been shot in the head. On the bathroom floor near the body, the investigators found a single .25 caliber shell casing
that was sitting on top of blood. So that led them to believe that that was the very last injury that he suffered.
But while Travis's body, his bedroom, and the bathroom all bore the marks of a bloody and violent struggle, there were no signs of forced entry or a robbery.
There's a ring, wallet belonging to Travis Alexander out in plain view, not stolen. Nothing appears out of place downstairs. The house is not ransacked. Nothing valuable appears to be stolen.
In fact, the rest of the house was so untouched that his roommates had been coming and going for days, completely unaware of the bloody horror behind Travis's bedroom door.
Travis's roommates thought he was already on this trip to Mexico.
That means his body was sitting there for 4 or 5 days.
They had noticed that there was something smelling a little funny, but weren't there at the home that much. Then it was a bachelor pad, and for all we know, I mean, he just left some dishes or something like that.
No sign of a robbery, a killer who came and went unseen, and the sheer ferocity of the attack. For the investigators, it all pointed to one thing.
This was a crime of passion, and police knew that from the get-go.
In fact, that wasn't all they knew. From the moment they called 911, Travis's friends figured they knew who the killer might be.
There's a girl that's been stalking him.
And according to Travis's friends, the stalker was his ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias. According to what his friends told the investigators, Jodi had always been clingy, even when the couple was dating.
She would snoop through his phone. She would look in his email. She was jealous of any girls that he spoke with.
Travis's friends claimed that at first, he had found Jodi's jealousy amusing.
He thought it was cute, like it was kind of a compliment. You know, this girl's really into me.
But they also said that he had quickly tired of Jodi's jealousy.
Travis was very unhappy with her and felt smothered by her, like she was too nosy into his business.
And they said that last June, when he finally broke things off with Jodi after nearly 5 months of dating, Travis had initially been relieved.
After being a single guy for so many years, he kind of liked his space.
But if Travis figured he would get his space back after the breakup, his friends said he was sadly mistaken.
They break up. What does she do? She moves to Mesa, Arizona.
In fact, Jodi did more than just move to the town where Travis lived.
On top of that, she moved to a place within 5 or 10 minutes of his house.
According to his friends, Travis had tried to be civil at first.
Even as ex-boyfriend and ex-girlfriend, they were still hanging out with each other a lot.
But he had also started dating other people.
I kept looking for that perfect Mormon woman he could marry.
And according to his friends, that's where things started to get strange.
He was being followed on his dates by Jodi.
She would just show up, like, to check on him, acting as if it's a friendly visit when other girls were there visiting him.
Travis had also told his friends that he would come home or even wake up to find Jodi inside his house.
He'd find her sleeping on his couch. Once found her hiding behind his Christmas tree when he came downstairs in the morning.
She would find ways to let herself into his house by either crawling through the doggy door, or she knew that Travis never locked the glass sliding door.
And when Travis started regularly dating another woman, his friends claimed that things had turned scary.
His tires were slashed 2 nights in a row while he was over at his girlfriend's house. When his girlfriend was at his house, her tires were slashed.
According to his friends, Travis didn't know for sure that Jodi had slashed his tires, but he definitely suspected it.
He told friends, if anything ever happens to me, Jodi did it.
He never reported the incidents, though. And in April of 2008, not long after Travis had broken up with his latest girlfriend, Jodi did something else unexpected. She had moved home to California.
The best thing that ever happened to him was her moving back to Northern California.
At least that's what Travis had thought.
He was looking forward to getting his life back on track.
But now, less than a month later, Travis was dead, and his friends were pretty sure that Jodi was responsible.
Because of her stalking behavior, because of the fact that she appeared to be infatuated with Travis, the friends believed from the get-go that this was the work of Jodi Arias.
The investigators would need more than a friend's hunch, however. They needed evidence, and the bloody crime scene yielded several important clues that could help identify the killer.
There was not a concerted effort to clean up this crime scene in any sort of meaningful way.
First off, inside the bathroom.
They find a long hair that clearly did not come from Travis.
Whether it came from the killer or not, the investigators didn't know. But outside the door dividing the bathroom from the bedroom, the investigators found something that most likely did. It was a palm print smeared into the blood on the wall, and it didn't belong to Travis.
Any killer who knows what they're doing gets rid of that print immediately.
At the scene, the investigators photographed the print and took samples of the blood for DNA purposes. And then, downstairs in the laundry room, they made another intriguing discovery. Stuffed in the washing machine with a load of towels and underwear was a digital camera.
The digital camera had been run through the washing machine, had been severely water damaged, but the memory card inside was intact.
Hoping the images on the camera's memory card weren't damaged, the investigators sent it, the hair and blood samples, as well as the images of the palm print, off to the crime lab for analysis.
There was a lot of blood evidence, and then on top of that, the camera.
Whether that evidence would lead to Jodi, the investigators had no way of knowing. But when they got back to the station later that day, they discovered that Jodi had been trying to get in touch with them.
Jodi starts reaching out to the lead detective on the case, calling him within 24 hours of the body being found, leaving him messages saying, "Hey, I just want to talk about Travis."
The detective immediately called Jodi back.
Hello, can you speak to Jodi, please?
This is Jodi.
And when the detective identified himself and asked what he could do for Jodi, she didn't hesitate to talk. In fact, the woman Travis's friends were convinced was his killer didn't act like a suspect at all.
I just wanted to offer any assistance that I might have. I was a really good friend of Travis's.
Coming up, Jodi puts a very different spin on her relationship with Travis.
We were intimate, but I wouldn't say romantic.
And the crime lab finds chilling evidence of Travis's last moments.
What he found blew their mind.
By the evening of June 10th, friends and coworkers of Travis Alexander were struggling to accept that the successful 30-year-old sales rep and motivational speaker was really dead.
His business was doing well. He was going to Cancun. Everything was going right.
However, as the news of Travis's murder spread, there was one detail that his close friends didn't have trouble believing. The speculation that his ex-girlfriend Jodi Arias was somehow involved.
I had no question. It wasn't like, I wonder if Jodi did this. It wasn't like, I think Jodi did this. I knew that Jodi Arias had killed my friend.
Travis had told all of his friends, "Gosh, I got this stalker ex-girlfriend. She won't leave me alone. She's crazy. She's obsessive."
But if Jodi had killed Travis, she certainly wasn't acting like it.
She called the Mesa Police Department and volunteered to help them in any way when it came to solving this murder.
I heard that he passed away and that his roommate found him or his friend found him or people were. I'm sorry. I'm upset.
And despite his friend's suspicions, Jodi told the investigator that she hadn't seen Travis since moving back to California months ago.
She said she hadn't seen him since April. She hadn't been in Mesa at all.
You haven't been back in town since then?
No, I haven't at all.
Although according to Jodi, Travis had been planning to visit her.
He's supposed to make a trip up here at the end of the month because there's a book called 1,000 Places to See Before You Die. We sort of got into that last year where we were starting to see all these different places on the list.
Was it possible? Had Travis and his so-called stalker planned to take a trip together? During the call, the investigator came right out and told Jodi that Travis's friends suspected she had something to do with his death.
People, some of his closest friends, began mentioning your name as, hey, you need to call her because she probably knows what happened to him or she possibly had something to do with it.
Oh gosh, no,
I needed to talk to you to find out why they would say something like that. Why they
I don't know. Maybe we can find the ex-girlfriend.
And when she went on to describe her relationship with Travis, she gave the investigator a very different account of their breakup. According to Jodi, she was the one who had ended it.
Jodi claims that she broke up with Travis because she caught him cheating on her.
I had the suspicion that he was cheating on me, and so I looked in his phone to find out, and I found all these text messages.
However, Jodi also said that the breakup wasn't exactly the end of their relationship.
We decided to remain friends, but, I kind of feel embarrassed talking about this.
The relationship becomes more of a friends with benefits type situation.
We were intimate, but I wouldn't say romantic.
Intimate, does that include like a sexual relationship with him?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. I know it's kind of embarrassing to talk about stuff
I know, and if you could just keep it confidential for now.
Part of the reason, according to Jodi, was Travis's Mormon faith.
The Mormon religion states that premarital sex is not acceptable.
Just really looked down upon in the church.
Jodi claimed that was why Travis had intentionally kept their post-breakup hookups over the past year a secret.
Travis had certain ideals, but he did not live up to many of those.
According to Jodi, the fact that Travis had kept their continued hookups hidden may have explained why his friends suspected her.
We just both realized that neither of us could be in an adult relationship, and then we continued to see each other a long time after that.
Well, I'm glad I did get a hold of you. You did call me because it kind of clears up a lot of the questions I had, a lot of the concerns.
But that didn't mean the investigators were ready to rule her out as a suspect. To do that, they would need her fingerprints and a DNA sample. And when the investigators asked for them, Jodi readily agreed. On June 17th, she drove to Mesa and met with the investigators.
Jodi seemed very cooperative, saying that she would do anything to help catch the killer.
And within hours of Jodi submitting her fingerprints and DNA sample, she would make good on her promise. Jodi would help the investigators catch Travis's killer. When the crime lab began processing the camera that investigators found in Travis Alexander's dryer, it looked as if the find was a dead end.
The photos that were on it were innocuous. There were Travis and, friends.
But the innocuous photos weren't the only ones on the camera's memory card. It also contained the data from a series of deleted images.
Forensic technicians were able to retrieve the deleted photos from the memory card.
And what he found blew their minds.
The deleted photos not only confirmed Jodi's story that she and Travis had continued to sleep together after their breakup, they documented what must have been their final hookup, a mere 5 days before Travis was found dead.
There are photographs, timestamp photographs of Jodi naked on Travis's bed.
There were naked pictures of Travis, too.
The naked photos look as though they've had sex, and they're taking pictures of each other.
Some of them are very explicit.
And they proved that contrary to what she had told the investigators, Jodi had been back to Mesa since moving to California, and that she had seen Travis shortly before his death.
The police now have proof positive that Jodi Arias lied.
But was that all she had lied about? The post-coital pictures weren't the only ones the investigators recovered from the camera. There was another series of photographs, timestamped nearly 3.5 hours after the bedroom shots. They were photos of Travis, naked and in the shower.
Pictures of Travis taking a shower, back shots, side shots.
And in the final shot of the series,
the very chilling photograph of Travis Alexander looking directly into the camera lens.
That wasn't the last picture on the camera, though it was the last one taken before Travis was murdered. There were 3 more photos on the camera.
They were apparently taken accidentally.
And the 3 blurry and out-of-focus snapshots apparently captured the murder as it occurred.
You see the shoulder of Travis and his head, and you see drops of blood.
Another photograph of Travis Alexander dead at the bottom of the shower.
It was an incredible break for the investigators.
This is something that you never find. Actual photographic evidence of what's going on.
That camera clearly was the smoking gun.
But could the authorities put that smoking gun in Jodi's hand? The fact that the same camera had photographed her in Travis's bedroom a few hours before he was killed wasn't enough. Before they made an arrest, the Mesa police wanted to be sure that the case against her was rock solid.
It took a few weeks for the DNA and the fingerprints to process.
And on June 26th, the investigators had the confirmation they wanted. Not only did they match Jodi to the bloody palm print on the wall outside the bathroom door, they matched her DNA, too.
It turned out to be a mixture of Travis and Jodi's blood.
She's cut herself. Her blood is at the scene.
The long hair that the investigators found at the crime scene turned out to be Jodi's as well.
She left behind so much evidence of her involvement in this killing.
This case was extremely strong.
On July 9th, 2008, the Maricopa County Grand Jury indicted Jodi for the murder of Travis Alexander. 6 days later, on July 15th, the investigators flew to Northern California and placed Jodi under arrest.
She was arrested at her grandmother's house.
Jodi was as cooperative as ever. Although as the investigators put Jodi in handcuffs, it wasn't entirely clear whether the 28-year-old understood just how much trouble she was in.
As detectives go to arrest Jodi, she asks, "Is there any way I can get my makeup on?"
Coming up, Jodi denies killing Travis.
I did not hurt Travis. I wouldn't do that to him.
But she claims to know who did.
I was really scared.
On July 15th, 2008, a little more than a month after friends found her ex-boyfriend Travis Alexander's decomposing body in the bathroom of his Mesa, Arizona home, 28-year-old Jodi Arias was arrested for his murder.
They know Jodi was there. They got her bloody palm print at the house. They've got hair. They've got DNA. They got the pictures.
The investigators who handled the case said they have never seen more evidence. It was just so damning and so overwhelming that she did it.
But that evening in California, when the investigators from Arizona led Jodi into an interrogation room at the local sheriff's office, she didn't seem too worried.
After she was arrested, Jodi seemed very nonchalant.
Any chance we could get my purse?
She's asking the detectives if she can fix her hair and pretty herself up before she gets her booking mugshot done.
But considering all the evidence they had, the investigators weren't about to buy her innocent act.
Were you at Travis's house on Wednesday?
Absolutely not. I was nowhere near Mesa. I was nowhere near Phoenix.
What if I could show you proof you were there? Will that change your mind?
I wasn't there.
Be honest with me, Jodi.
They put down photos, and they show photos and say, okay, you didn't kill him. What about these photos?
You were at Travis's house. You guys had a sexual encounter.
But Jodi didn't so much as blink, even when confronted by the fact that the police had photos putting her at the crime scene.
Are you sure it's me? I mean, that because I was
Jodi,
not there.
It's you. And you know it's you.
And as far as the investigators were concerned, only one question remained.
I want to know why. Why did you do this to him?
I wouldn't hurt Travis. He's done so much for me.
There's so much evidence in that house. So much, and it all points to you.
Jodi still refused to budge, claiming that it all had to be some sort of mistake.
She said, "You're going to find my palm prints, my fingerprints, my hair. You're going to find them there."
I lived there. I was there for months and months and months.
She stuck to her story that she was not there. She was not there. She had nothing to do with this killing, even when faced with the evidence.
But did Jodi know just how much evidence the police had against her?
I know you took pictures of him in the shower just before he died.
I don't think he would allow that.
And the camera actually took a couple of photos by accident. during the time he was being killed.
Really?
Jodi appeared surprised, but the fact that the investigators had all but caught her in the act still wasn't enough to end her denials.
I did not hurt Travis. I wouldn't do that to him.
It was mind-boggling that she would say she wasn't involved with it.
In the end, it didn't matter. That night, after several grueling hours of interrogation failed to produce a confession, the investigators booked Jodi on murder charges.
She actually asked the detective if she could primp and fix herself up before her mugshot is taken.
She knew her face was going to be plastered for the world to see, so she might as well put up a good appearance.
And looking good for the camera may not have been her only motivation.
When Jodi was charged with Travis's murder, we were worried that she would be able to flirt her way out of this or talk her way out of this or, make people feel sorry for her.
Travis's friends may have been right to worry, because after spending the night in jail, Jodi contacted the investigators and requested another interview. And this time, she appeared far less defiant.
I can tell you everything that I know.
She still wasn't claiming responsibility for the crime, however. Instead, she told the investigators she had witnessed the murder.
All of a sudden, the story changes. Now Jodi says she was there.
And in Jodi's new story, 2 intruders had killed Travis.
She said it was these 2 ninjas, or these 2 masked people.
They broke into the home, took her and Travis pretty much hostage.
Did they say why they were there?
No. But it was obvious they were there for him.
Jodi claimed that after killing Travis, the masked intruders contemplated killing her, too.
They debated back and forth, live or die.
But in the end, according to Jodi, the leader of the duo had decided to let her go.
He said, you need to leave. And don't you call anybody. And don't you say anything. And don't you act like anything happened. He's all, I'm giving you one chance.
And you just left. You didn't run to the neighbors. You didn't try to call him. You knew they were in his house. You had time to run to the neighbor. Why didn't you do that?
I was really scared. I was really freaked out of my mind.
According to Jodi, she had been so freaked out that she had waited more than a month to tell the investigators the truth out of fear for her own safety.
She says one of them said, "Oh, you're the one from California," as though they knew something about her.
They got my address, and they know where my family is.
That was what Jodi claimed. But by the time she finished spinning her tale of the 2 mysterious intruders who left no trace, the investigators were convinced that they knew something about Jodi, too, that she was a liar.
That these people would break into the house, kill Travis, and leave this witness there. It was just unbelievable to detectives.
But I came in here hoping that you would tell me the truth. And this is not the truth, Jodi.
Coming up, Jodi's arrest catapults the pretty 28-year-old into the national spotlight.
There was this amazing interest in this case.
There's religion, there's sex, there's lies.
It turns into a TV event.
On July 16, 2008, Jodi Arias had just spent several grueling hours in a police interrogation room, giving what she claimed was the real story behind Travis Alexander's brutal murder.
She comes up with the story that 2 masked, armed intruders barged into the house and immediately began stabbing Travis.
Unfortunately for Jodi, the investigators didn't believe a word of it.
They left you alive, let you go. That never happens. Why would anybody do that?
The authorities didn't have any intention of letting Jodi go either. Charged with first-degree murder and held without bail, she was extradited back to Arizona, where the national press was already converging, thanks to the savage nature of Travis's murder.
You already had a very sensational crime. You already had TV that was really interested in the story.
Jodi knew this would be a big story at the time of her arrest.
And once in Arizona, the woman who had primped for her mugshot proved she would go to any length to get in front of the story and the cameras.
She held a press conference with the local media and some national outlets.
And that was only the beginning. Over the next 3 months, Jodi went from accused murderer to national celebrity.
She's doing interviews with 48 Hours, Inside Edition, major networks.
There was this amazing interest in this case, not just locally, but all over the place.
She couldn't give the media enough interviews.
And the audiences couldn't get enough of the pretty 28-year-old's story.
It's got a lot of layers to it. There's a woman who brutally killed her boyfriend. There's religion, there's sex, there's lies.
So now all of a sudden it turns into a TV event.
And the interest in the case was about to rise even higher. On October 31st, the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office announced that they would be seeking the death penalty.
In this case, the manner of death, the gratuitous violence, the multiple injuries to Travis Alexander, that was the factor that made this death eligible.
It was a decision that Travis's friends and family welcomed.
They believed Jodi Arias was the most cold-blooded, calculated type of killer around.
But they also worried whether a jury would agree, especially when the accused was such an accomplished and attractive liar.
It only takes one person that she can trick into feeling sympathy for her, into believing her lies.
On part 2 of the Jodi Arias Snapped special event, Jodi's trial brings shocking new allegations against her.
She had just almost cut Travis Alexander's head off, and she's humping Ryan Burns hours later.
She delivers a stunning new account of Travis's death.
He body slammed me again on the tile.
And floors the courtroom with an accusation so shocking that no one saw it coming.
London, November 7th, 1974. In one of the wealthiest districts of the city, the streets of Belgravia sat under a cold autumn darkness. The rows of white stucco townhouses looked calm and untouched. The kind of neighborhood where curtains stay drawn. Chauffeurs waited quietly outside private clubs, and scandals were usually hidden behind polished smiles and expensive doors. Nothing about Lower Belgrave Street suggested that before midnight, it would become the center of one of the most infamous mysteries in British criminal history. At approximately 10 o'clock that evening, the quiet atmosphere shattered when a woman stumbled into a nearby pub covered in blood. Witnesses later described her as pale, shaking uncontrollably, and almost incoherent with terror. Her hair was disheveled. Blood stained her face and clothes. She appeared as though she had escaped something unimaginable. Customers inside the pub froze as she entered. Some reportedly believed at first that she had been hit by a car. Others thought she had been attacked during a robbery. But the truth she delivered was stranger and far more horrifying than anything they expected. The woman was Veronica Lucan, the estranged wife of British aristocrat John Bingham. The 7th Earl of Lucan, a man known throughout elite London society simply as Lord Lucan. And according to Veronica, her husband had just murdered the family nanny. In the confusion and panic of that moment, the pub transformed from a place of ordinary conversation into the first public scene of a case that would obsess Britain for decades. Veronica reportedly cried out that her husband had tried to kill her. She spoke of violence inside her home just moments earlier. A struggle, a dead woman downstairs. Blood, darkness. Panic spread quickly among the witnesses. Police were called immediately. Within minutes, officers rushed toward 46 Lower Belgrave Street, the elegant Belgravia residence where Veronica lived with her children and their nanny, Sandra Rivet. Inside the house, investigators encountered a scene of extraordinary brutality. In the basement, Sandra Rivet lay dead. Her body had been placed inside a sack. She had suffered catastrophic head injuries inflicted with a lead pipe wrapped in medical tape. The attack had been sudden and devastating. Nearby were signs of another violent struggle, evidence consistent with Veronica's account that she herself had narrowly escaped death. But even in those earliest moments, one fact elevated the case beyond an ordinary homicide investigation. The man accused by Veronica was not an unknown intruder or common criminal. He was a British earl, a member of the aristocracy, a familiar face in elite gambling clubs and upper-class social circles. Charming, educated, wealthy by birth, and once celebrated in London society, Lord Lucan represented a world most people only glimpsed through newspapers and gossip columns. That world now collided violently with murder. And before police could arrest him, Lord Lucan vanished. By the time authorities began searching for him, he was already gone. No confirmed sighting would ever place him in front of investigators again. His disappearance transformed a shocking murder case into something even larger, a national obsession. In the days that followed, newspapers across Britain printed his photograph on their front pages. International media followed every development. Scotland Yard launched a massive manhunt. Interpol became involved. Rumors spread with astonishing speed. Some believed Lucan had fled the country with help from wealthy friends. Others believed he had taken his own life. Still others insisted he had escaped successfully and was living abroad under a false identity. Decades later, alleged sightings would continue appearing across the world, in Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, India, Brazil. Theories multiplied because there was one thing nobody could explain with certainty. How could one of the most recognizable aristocrats in Britain simply disappear? The mystery surrounding Lord Lucan would eventually become larger than the murder itself. Entire books would be written about him. Television dramas and documentaries would revisit the case repeatedly. His disappearance entered British folklore, transforming him into something between fugitive and ghost. Yet beneath the mythology and public fascination remained a much darker reality. A woman named Sandra Rivet lost her life in a violent attack. Veronica Lucan survived what she claimed was an attempt on her own life. 3 children were left at the center of a catastrophe that unfolded within their own home. And behind the glamorous headlines about aristocrats, gambling clubs, and mysterious disappearances was a story about fear, collapsing privilege, domestic violence, and desperation. To understand why the Lord Lucan case still grips public imagination more than half a century later, it is necessary to return to the beginning, not to the night of the murder, but to the man himself. Before he became Britain's most famous missing fugitive, John Bingham was known for something very different. In the social circles of London's elite, he was charming and charismatic. Tall, elegant, confident, and intelligent. He appeared to embody the image of old British aristocracy. He had attended Eton, one of England's most prestigious schools, and served in the Coldstream Guards, a regiment associated with status and tradition. To many observers, Lucan looked like a man born into certainty. But behind the polished public image, cracks had already begun to form long before November 1974. Gambling increasingly consumed his life. Financial problems mounted. His marriage deteriorated into bitterness and hostility. Friends and acquaintances would later describe his behavior as volatile and unstable. His separation from Veronica turned into a deeply personal and humiliating custody battle over their children. By the early 1970s, the image of Lucky Lucan, the suave aristocrat who spent nights inside exclusive gambling clubs, was beginning to collapse. And then there was the atmosphere inside the Lucan household itself. Veronica later described living in fear of her husband. Their marriage had become defined by conflict. The tension between them was not hidden behind closed doors forever. Eventually, it spilled into legal disputes and public scrutiny. When the courts sided with Veronica in the custody battle, many investigators later believed the ruling represented a devastating emotional blow to Lucan's pride and sense of control. Into this increasingly fractured environment came Sandra Rivet, the family nanny. Unlike the aristocrats whose names dominated newspaper coverage, Sandra came from an ordinary working-class background. She was employed to help care for the children and manage domestic responsibilities within the house. There is something particularly tragic about her place in this story. Sandra was not part of the marital war between Veronica and Lucan. She was not involved in gambling debts, social scandals, or aristocratic reputation. Yet on the night of November 7th, she became the victim at the center of one of Britain's most notorious criminal cases. Investigators would later develop a theory that added another disturbing layer to the crime. Lord Lucan may never have intended to kill Sandra Rivet at all. According to the prevailing theory, he intended to murder Veronica. In the darkness of the basement, he may have mistaken Sandra for his estranged wife. If true, Sandra died because she happened to descend the stairs at the wrong moment in a house already poisoned by fear and resentment. The horror of that possibility has haunted discussion of the case ever since. But the true power of the Lord Lucan mystery lies not only in the violence of that night. It lies in what followed afterward. Most murder investigations move toward a conclusion. A suspect is arrested. A trial takes place. Evidence is tested in court. The public eventually receives some form of official resolution. The Lucan case never followed that path. Instead, it fractured into uncertainty almost immediately. There was no arrest, no criminal trial, no confession, no body, only theories, only rumors, only questions that remain unanswered decades later. Did Lord Lucan panic after Sandra Rivet's death and flee blindly into the night? Did powerful friends secretly help him escape Britain? Did he board a ferry and throw himself into the sea? Or did he spend years watching the world speculate about him while living quietly under another name? Somewhere far away, every few years, the mystery seemed to revive itself. Someone would claim to have seen him in another country. Newspapers would publish fresh speculation. Amateur investigators would chase new leads. Yet no theory ever produced definitive proof. The result is a case suspended permanently between history and myth. There's another reason this story continues to fascinate people. The Lord Lucan case exposed something uncomfortable about British society in the 1970s. The idea that wealth, status, and powerful social connections might allow someone to escape accountability became central to public discussion surrounding the investigation. Whether true or not, many people suspected that an ordinary man accused of murder would never have vanished so completely. Lucan's aristocratic background shaped public perception from the very beginning. To some, he became the symbol of privilege corrupted by violence and entitlement. To others, he became a tragic figure destroyed by gambling addiction, emotional collapse, and panic. But for the family of Sandra Rivet and for Veronica Lucan, the mystery was never romantic. It was deeply personal. Sandra Rivet's death was real. Veronica's injuries were real. The fear inside that house was real. And behind every headline about the missing lord stood the permanent consequences left behind for the people whose lives were shattered by the events of that night. More than 50 years later, the story still feels strangely unfinished. Officially, Lord Lucan was declared presumed dead in 1999, and a death certificate was finally issued in 2016. Yet even legal closure failed to erase public fascination. The unanswered questions remain embedded in British cultural memory. People continue debating whether he escaped or died. Books and documentaries continue revisiting the evidence. And somewhere at the center of the mystery is a final unsettling possibility. Perhaps the truth disappeared with Lord Lucan himself. Long before his name became associated with one of Britain's greatest unsolved mysteries, John Bingham lived inside a world built on privilege, tradition, and appearances. He was born Richard John Bingham on December 18, 1934. into an aristocratic family whose identity was deeply connected to the structure of the British upper class. The Binghams belonged to a society that often appeared untouchable from the outside, a closed world of inherited titles. Private clubs, military prestige, and old social connections that stretched across generations. Wealth and status were not simply advantages in that environment. They shaped identity itself. Men born into families like the Binghams were expected to carry themselves with discipline and confidence, to preserve the reputation attached to their family names, and to move through life with a sense of certainty unavailable to most ordinary people. From an early age, John Bingham appeared destined to follow that path. He was educated at Eton College, one of the most elite schools in England, an institution that produced prime ministers, aristocrats, military officers, and members of the royal circle. Eton represented far more than academic education. It functioned as a gateway into Britain's ruling establishment, teaching not only knowledge but behavior, hierarchy, and social identity. Young men there learned how to present themselves with composure and confidence, how to navigate elite circles, and how to preserve the traditions associated with their class. For someone like John Bingham, the environment reinforced the idea that the world operated according to inherited structures that people like him naturally occupied at the top of. After Eton, Bingham served in the Coldstream Guards, one of the oldest and most prestigious regiments in the British Army. Military service among aristocratic men of his generation was often viewed as both duty and continuation of family tradition. The Coldstream Guards, with their ceremonial visibility and elite reputation, fit naturally into the image Bingham projected to the world. Tall, well-dressed, intelligent, and socially confident, he moved comfortably through upper-class society. Friends and acquaintances often described him as charming and charismatic. He possessed the polished manners expected from someone of his background, and in public settings he frequently appeared calm, sophisticated, and self-assured. In 1964, after the death of his father, he inherited the title of the 7th Earl of Lucan. From that moment onward, he became known publicly as Lord Lucan. The title strengthened his social standing and deepened his visibility within elite London society. During the 1960s, Britain was changing rapidly. Traditional class structures were beginning to weaken under cultural and political transformation. Yet the aristocracy still held enormous symbolic power. Figures like Lord Lucan occupied a strange position in public imagination, both admired and resented. Glamorous, yet increasingly disconnected from ordinary life. Lucan fit perfectly into newspaper portrayals of aristocratic sophistication. He frequented exclusive clubs, moved among wealthy socialites, and cultivated an image of effortless confidence. Among his favorite destinations was the Claremont Club, an elite gambling club in London associated with wealth, secrecy, and status. Gambling became central to his identity. At first, it seemed almost like part of the aristocratic lifestyle itself. High-stakes betting carried a certain glamour inside Lucan's social world. Winning large sums of money demonstrated nerve and confidence. Losing heavily could be dismissed as temporary misfortune, at least for a time. Lord Lucan developed a reputation at the gambling tables that earned him the nickname Lucky Lucan. The name suggested charm, confidence, and natural fortune. In elite circles, it enhanced his mystique. He appeared to many as the perfect embodiment of upper-class ease, handsome, daring, intelligent, and impossible to intimidate. But behind the polished image, gambling gradually transformed from entertainment into obsession. The atmosphere inside gambling clubs often masked the destructive nature of addiction, especially among wealthy men who could conceal losses longer than most people. Over time, Lucan accumulated serious debts. The financial pressure became increasingly difficult to manage. Yet appearances mattered enormously within aristocratic society, and admitting failure carried humiliation. The contradiction between Lucan's public image and his private reality began to grow more severe. Outwardly, he remained the elegant aristocrat. Privately, his life was becoming unstable. Friends later observed changes in his behavior. The confident social charm that once defined him became increasingly mixed with volatility and tension. Gambling losses intensified emotional strain. Financial insecurity threatened not only his comfort, but his identity. For someone raised to believe status and control were inseparable from personal worth, losing either could feel catastrophic. Around the same period, his marriage to Veronica Duncan was also collapsing. John Bingham married Veronica in 1963, and initially the relationship appeared to represent the ideal aristocratic family. They had 3 children together and lived within the wealthy social environment expected of their class. From the outside, the marriage seemed stable and privileged. But beneath that appearance, tensions were already forming. Over time, arguments became more frequent and more serious. According to later accounts, the relationship deteriorated into hostility and fear. Veronica accused Lucan of violent behavior, and those close to the family began recognizing signs of deep instability within the marriage. The contrast between public image and private reality became increasingly stark. This duality would later become one of the defining elements of the entire case. To the outside world, Lord Lucan remained an aristocrat associated with elegance and status. Inside the home, however, the atmosphere reportedly became dominated by anxiety, conflict, and emotional strain. Veronica increasingly feared her husband. The marriage entered a destructive spiral from which neither seemed capable of escaping peacefully. By 1973, the couple separated. What followed was not merely a marital breakdown, but a deeply personal war over identity, control, and humiliation. Their custody battle over the children became especially significant. In upper-class British society, reputation mattered intensely, and losing a public legal battle carried enormous emotional consequences. When the courts ultimately ruled in Veronica's favor regarding custody, investigators later believe the decision may have profoundly affected Lucan psychologically. To outside observers, the ruling represented a normal legal outcome in a collapsing marriage. But for Lucan, already struggling financially and emotionally, it may have felt like another devastating loss of authority and control. During this period, Veronica hired a nanny and housekeeper named Sandra Rivet to help care for the children. Sandra came from an entirely different world than the Lucans. Unlike the aristocratic circles surrounding Lord Lucan, Sandra represented ordinary working-class Britain. She was employed to provide practical support within the household, caring for the children and assisting with daily responsibilities during an increasingly tense period in the family's life. Her role placed her directly inside the emotional atmosphere of the fractured household, though she herself was not responsible for the conflict surrounding her. This distinction is important because the public fascination surrounding Lord Lucan often overshadowed the life of Sandra Rivet herself. Much of the media attention focused on the missing aristocrat, the mystery of his disappearance, and the glamour associated with British high society. Yet Sandra was the person who lost her life. She entered the household as an employee caring for children. She became trapped inside a situation shaped by escalating marital conflict, fear, resentment, and instability far beyond her control. Accounts suggest that Veronica depended heavily on Sandra's support during the separation from Lucan. The house at 46 Lower Belgrave Street was no longer simply a family home. It had become a place overshadowed by tension, legal disputes, emotional stress, and fear of confrontation with Lucan shaped daily life there. By late 1974, the atmosphere surrounding the Lucan family had become deeply strained. Lord Lucan himself remained connected to gambling culture and social clubs. But the stability that once defined his public image had eroded significantly. Financial difficulties continued. Emotional pressure mounted. The custody battle remained unresolved emotionally even after legal rulings. And despite the separation, the connection between John and Veronica Lucan was far from finished. Looking back at the case decades later, many investigators and commentators identified this period as crucial in understanding the tragedy that followed. The events of November 7th, 1974 did not emerge from nowhere. They developed within an environment already shaped by anger, humiliation, instability, and fear. Yet there was still nothing inevitable about what happened next. Many troubled marriages end without violence. Many individuals suffering financial collapse never commit crimes. That distinction matters because the Lord Lucan case is ultimately not a story about destiny. It is a story about choices made under emotional pressure and the catastrophic consequences that followed. By the autumn of 1974, the lives of everyone connected to the Lucan household had become increasingly fragile. Veronica was attempting to protect herself and her children while navigating separation from a man she feared. Sandra Rivet continued performing her responsibilities inside a tense household. Lord Lucan moved through London carrying the weight of debt, personal collapse, and growing instability behind the facade of aristocratic composure. Outside the house, London carried on as normal. Cars moved through Belgravia streets. Wealthy residents attended dinners and clubs. Newspapers printed stories about politics and entertainment. But inside 46 Lower Belgrave Street, something darker was building quietly beneath the surface. And on the evening of November 7th, 1974, everything would finally break apart. The evening of November 7th, 1974, began quietly inside 46 Lower Belgrave Street. The townhouse stood in one of London's most affluent districts, surrounded by expensive residences, embassies, and carefully maintained streets where silence itself seemed part of the architecture. Belgravia was a place associated with discretion and wealth. The sort of neighborhood where disturbances were rare and public scandal even rarer. Yet behind the elegant exterior of the Lucan residence, tension had already become part of daily life. Veronica Lucan lived there with her 3 children and Sandra Rivet, the nanny who helped manage the household during the ongoing separation from Lord Lucan. By that point, Veronica and her estranged husband were no longer living together. But the emotional conflict between them remained unresolved. The custody battle over the children and the bitterness surrounding the collapse of the marriage continued to hang heavily over the household. That night, however, initially appeared ordinary. There were no obvious signs that within hours the house would become the center of a murder. Investigation that would shock Britain for generations. As the evening progressed, Sandra Rivet went downstairs to the basement kitchen area to prepare tea. The basement level of the house was dimly lit and separated from the upper floors in a way that created an isolated atmosphere even during normal circumstances. In later years, descriptions of the basement would become central to understanding investigators' theory of the crime. The darkness, the narrow layout, and the confusion of movement within the house all contributed to what police believed happened next. Sometime after Sandra went downstairs, Veronica reportedly heard unusual sounds coming from below. At first, the noises may not have seemed immediately alarming. Old houses produce echoes and movement. But something about the disturbance unsettled her enough that she decided to investigate personally. Veronica began descending toward the basement. What happened next would become one of the most chilling moments in British true crime history. According to Veronica's account, as soon as she reached the lower level, She was violently attacked by a man hiding in the darkness. She was struck with a blunt object and then physically overpowered. The attacker attempted to strangle her as the two struggled violently in near darkness. The assault was sudden and chaotic. Veronica later described terror and confusion as she fought desperately for survival inside the confined basement area. At some point during the struggle, she heard the attacker speak. One phrase remained permanently fixed in public memory because of its simplicity and menace. According to Veronica, the man told her, "Shut up." It was not merely the words themselves that mattered. It was the voice. Veronica later stated that she immediately recognized it as the voice of her husband, Lord Lucan. During the struggle, the attacker's mask reportedly slipped or was removed, allowing Veronica to see his face clearly. She later insisted there was no doubt in her mind. The man attacking her was John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan. The horror of the situation deepened moments later when Veronica discovered Sandra Rivet in the basement. Sandra was already dead. Her body had been placed inside a sack. The injuries inflicted upon her were catastrophic. She had been struck repeatedly with a lead pipe wrapped in medical tape, suffering devastating head trauma. The violence of the attack shocked investigators and would later become central to theories about the killer's emotional state during the crime. Police believe the attack on Sandra had likely occurred quickly and brutally, leaving her with little chance of survival. Investigators soon developed a theory that would shape public understanding of the case forever. Lord Lucan may have intended to murder Veronica, but accidentally attacked Sandra instead. According to this theory, the dark basement environment caused Lucan to mistake Sandra for his estranged wife. The two women may have appeared similar enough in the darkness for confusion to occur, at least initially. If true, the crime carried an additional layer of tragedy. Sandra Rivet may have died simply because she entered the basement first. For Veronica, the discovery of Sandra's body combined terror with shock and disbelief. She had survived an attack that she believed was intended to kill her, only to find another woman dead inside her home. Yet even after the violence, the situation did not end immediately. According to Veronica's later statements, Lord Lucan attempted to regain control of the situation following the attack. He reportedly claimed that what had happened was an accident. He then suggested that Veronica help him stage the scene to look like a failed break-in carried out by an unknown intruder. In Veronica's account, Lucan urged her to cooperate and assist him in escaping the consequences of the crime. The psychological tension of those moments is difficult to fully imagine. Veronica was injured, traumatized, and standing inside a house containing the body of a murdered woman. At the same time, she was face to face with the man she believed had just attacked her and killed Sandra Rivet. Whether out of fear, survival instinct, or strategic calculation, Veronica reportedly pretended to cooperate with Lucan's requests. She did not openly resist him in that moment. Instead, she waited for an opportunity to escape. At some point, Lucan went upstairs, reportedly to wash his hands and change clothes. Veronica used that moment to flee. Injured and covered in blood, she ran from the house into the streets of Belgravia, seeking help. The image became one of the defining scenes of the entire case. An aristocrat's wife stumbling through one of London's wealthiest neighborhoods in visible terror. Desperate to escape, Veronica eventually reached a nearby pub. Witnesses inside later described the shock of seeing her enter. She appeared disoriented and terrified. Blood covered her face and clothing. Customers reportedly froze in confusion before realizing something catastrophic had happened. Veronica cried out that her husband had murdered the nanny and tried to kill her. The calm atmosphere inside the pub vanished instantly. Patrons rushed to help while authorities were contacted. In many ways, this moment marked the true beginning of the public Lord Lucan case. Before that instant, the violence remained hidden inside a private home. Once Veronica entered the pub, the tragedy became public reality. Police arrived quickly at Lower Belgrave Street and began securing the scene. Inside the house, they encountered evidence consistent with a violent struggle. Sandra Rivett's body was discovered in the basement, and Veronica's account of the attack immediately shaped the direction of the investigation. Yet one critical detail transformed the case from a murder investigation into something much larger. Lord Lucan himself was gone. By the time police sought to locate him, he had already disappeared. The timing of his disappearance became one of the strongest factors influencing public perception of guilt. Innocent people do not usually vanish immediately after being accused of murder. To investigators, Lucan's absence appeared deeply suspicious from the very beginning. Yet the disappearance also created complications. Without Lucan in custody, there could be no immediate interrogation, no arrest, and no direct confrontation between suspect and police. The investigation suddenly became divided into two interconnected mysteries: the murder itself and the fate of Lord Lucan. As news of the crime spread through London, the public reaction was immediate and intense. The idea that a British aristocrat had potentially murdered a nanny and attacked his estranged wife inside an elegant Belgravia townhouse shocked the nation. Britain in the 1970s still carried powerful assumptions about class and respectability. Violent crime was often associated in the public imagination with social disorder, poverty, or outsiders, not with titled members of the aristocracy educated at Eton and connected to elite social clubs. The Lord Lucan case shattered those assumptions. Newspapers quickly recognized the extraordinary nature of the story. The ingredients were almost impossible for the media to ignore: wealth, nobility, violence, marital conflict, gambling addiction, and a missing suspect. Public fascination intensified almost immediately. But beneath the sensational headlines remained the human reality of the crime itself. Sandra Rivet was dead. Veronica Lucan had survived a brutal attack. 3 children remained connected to a household now transformed into the center of national horror. As investigators worked through the crime scene, they also began piecing together the final known movements of Lord Lucan. Questions emerged rapidly. Had he planned the attack in advance? Had he intended specifically to kill Veronica? Was Sandra attacked accidentally after being mistaken for her employer? And perhaps most urgently of all, where had Lord Lucan gone in the hours immediately following the murder? No one yet understood that the disappearance itself would become one of the most enduring mysteries in modern British history. At first, authorities likely believed Lucan would eventually be located through ordinary investigative work. Britain was not a country where famous aristocrats simply vanished forever. Yet that assumption would soon collapse. The deeper police looked into the aftermath of the crime, the stranger the case became. Because while Sandra Rivet's death represented a horrifying act of violence, the disappearance of Lord Lucan transformed the case into something else entirely, a mystery that would outlive nearly everyone directly involved in it. By the early hours of November 8, 1974, the investigation into the murder of Sandra Rivet had already become extraordinary. Police were not searching for an unknown suspect hidden somewhere in the shadows of London's criminal underworld. They were searching for a British aristocrat whose face was recognizable throughout elite society. Yet despite his social visibility, Lord Lucan seemed to disappear almost immediately after the attack at Lower Belgrave Street. The speed and completeness of his disappearance became one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire case. Investigators began reconstructing his movements from the moment Veronica escaped the house and alerted authorities. The evidence strongly suggested that Lucan fled by car shortly after the attack. But where he intended to go, and whether he expected to survive long-term, became central. questions almost immediately. In the first phase of the investigation, police focused heavily on locating Lucan alive. At that stage, there was still uncertainty about his intentions and mental state. Had he panicked after the murder and fled impulsively? Was he attempting to escape Britain permanently? Or was he already dead somewhere unknown? Those questions would dominate the investigation for decades because every possible answer seemed plausible. Yet none could be proven conclusively. One of the earliest significant discoveries came when Lord Lucan's abandoned Ford Corsair was located in Uckfield, East Sussex, several days after the murder. The car immediately became one of the most important pieces of physical evidence in the case. Investigators carefully examined its interior, hoping it would reveal Lucan's movements and intentions after leaving Belgravia. Inside the vehicle, police found bloodstains, bandages, and a series of letters addressed to friends and acquaintances. The contents of those letters became crucial because they represented the only direct explanation Lucan ever provided regarding the events of November 7th. In the letters, Lucan attempted to present himself not as a murderer, but as a man caught inside a horrifying misunderstanding. He claimed he had gone to Veronica's house and encountered a violent situation already in progress. According to his version of events, an unknown intruder had attacked Veronica, and Lucan had attempted to intervene and help her. He insisted he was innocent and implied that circumstances had been misinterpreted. To investigators, however, the explanation appeared deeply implausible. The timing alone raised serious doubts. Veronica had identified Lucan as her attacker. Sandra Rivet was dead inside the basement. Lucan had disappeared immediately afterward instead of remaining to cooperate with police. And now his abandoned vehicle was discovered containing evidence suggesting injury, panic, and flight. Rather than convincing investigators of innocence, the letters seemed to reinforce suspicion. The discovery of bandages inside the vehicle also raised additional questions. Did Lucan sustain injuries during the struggle with Veronica? If so, where had he gone afterward for treatment or assistance? Was someone helping him remain hidden? Or had he abandoned the car intentionally before taking his own life elsewhere? Every new detail expanded the mystery instead of resolving it. The abandoned car at Uckfield soon became symbolic of the entire case itself. Evidence frozen in time, pointing toward possibilities without delivering certainty. As investigators continued their search, the scale of the manhunt increased dramatically. Scotland Yard launched an intensive effort to locate Lucan, distributing his description widely across Britain. Border authorities were alerted. International police organizations, including Interpol, became involved as the possibility of international escape grew more serious. Newspapers across Britain printed his photograph repeatedly, transforming him into the most recognizable fugitive in the country. Public fascination intensified rapidly because the story seemed almost impossible to believe. An aristocrat accused of murder had vanished completely within hours of the crime. The combination of wealth, privilege, violence, and disappearance created a narrative unlike ordinary criminal cases. Media coverage became relentless. Every rumor generated headlines. Every reported sighting produced new speculation. Britain in the 1970s was deeply conscious of class identity, and the Lucan case forced uncomfortable public conversations about privilege and accountability. Many ordinary citizens questioned whether a man of lesser social status could ever have disappeared so effectively. The suspicion that wealthy friends might have assisted Lucan became one of the central theories. Almost immediately, Lord Lucan possessed extensive social connections among Britain's aristocracy and upper class circles. Investigators and journalists speculated that those connections may have provided resources unavailable to ordinary fugitives. Some theorized that Lucan was transported secretly out of the country using private aircraft or yachts owned by wealthy associates. Others believed loyal friends may have hidden him temporarily while arranging permanent escape. Abroad, no definitive evidence ever confirmed such assistance. But the theory persisted because Lukin's disappearance seemed remarkably successful given the intensity of search. If he escaped Britain alive, many believed he could not have done so entirely alone. At the same time, another theory emerged that appeared equally convincing to many observers. Suicide. According to some friends and acquaintances, Lukin may have been emotionally shattered after the events of November 7th. His financial difficulties, collapsing marriage, public humiliation, and the catastrophic violence of that night may have pushed him into complete psychological collapse. Some believed he fled toward the English Channel, boarded a ferry, and eventually jumped into the sea. Veronica herself reportedly came to believe this explanation later in life. In some ways, the suicide theory seemed emotionally logical. A man already under enormous personal pressure commits a horrific act, realizes the consequences are unavoidable, and ends his own life shortly afterward. Yet despite its plausibility, the theory suffered from the same problem that haunted every aspect of the case. No body was ever found. There was no confirmed physical evidence proving Lukin died by suicide. Without a body or verified witness account, the theory remained speculation rather than conclusion. As months turned into years, the absence of definitive answers transformed Lord Lukin from fugitive into cultural myth. Reported sightings began appearing around the world. Some people claimed to have seen him in South Africa. Others believed he was living quietly in Australia or New Zealand under a false identity. Additional rumors placed him in India or Brazil. Each alleged sighting revived media attention briefly before collapsing under lack of evidence. Yet the persistence of these reports revealed something important about the psychology of unresolved mysteries. Once a person disappears without explanation, the public often continues searching long after logic suggests hope should fade. Lord Lukin's case encouraged endless speculation precisely because it lacked closure. Every unconfirmed sighting allowed people to imagine that somewhere, somehow, he remained alive. One particularly strange rumor claimed Lukin had become a Buddhist monk in Australia, abandoning aristocratic life entirely and hiding within spiritual isolation. The theory sounded improbable, yet circulated widely enough to gain public attention. Neil Behrman, the son of Sandra Rivet, later claimed he believed he had traced Lukin's survival to Australia. But once again, no definitive evidence confirmed the story. The absence of proof became the defining feature of the investigation itself. Each possibility remained suspended permanently between plausibility and uncertainty. Investigators faced enormous challenges precisely because the case lacked finality. Normally, criminal investigations eventually narrow toward resolution through arrests, forensic evidence, confessions, or recover bodies. The Lukin investigation resisted every form of closure. Even the existing evidence produced debate. Veronica's testimony identifying Lukin remained central and highly significant. Yet without Lukin present, there could be no direct courtroom confrontation or criminal trial. The letters found in the Ford Corsair offered an alternative version of events, but investigators viewed them skeptically. Physical evidence established violence had occurred, but it could not answer the ultimate question haunting the case: what happened after Lukin fled? The psychological dimension of the mystery also fascinated the public. Lord Lukin embodied contradictions that made interpretation difficult. He was simultaneously viewed as charming and unstable, privileged and desperate, sophisticated and potentially violent. Some observers saw him as a cold-blooded killer who escaped justice through wealth and social connections. Others viewed him as a psychologically broken man destroyed by addiction, financial collapse, and emotional desperation. The lack of definitive answers allowed competing narratives to survive indefinitely. Over time, the disappearance itself began overshadowing the murder of Sandra Rivet in public memory. Media coverage increasingly focused on the missing aristocrat rather than the victim whose death initiated the entire case. This imbalance disturbed some observers, particularly those connected to Sandra's family. Beneath the mystery and speculation remained a brutal reality. A woman had been killed while performing her ordinary duties as a nanny inside the household where she worked. Veronica Lukin had survived a terrifying attack. 3 children lost stability and security within a single night. Yet the public imagination became dominated by the question of Lord Lukin's fate. Perhaps that shift occurred because unresolved disappearances create a unique kind of psychological tension. Human beings are uncomfortable with unfinished endings. A confirmed death allows mourning. An arrest allows judgment. But disappearance leaves imagination permanently active. Every theory feels incomplete because certainty never arrives. In the Lord Lukin case, that uncertainty became almost addictive to public fascination. The investigation, therefore, evolved into something larger than ordinary criminal procedure. It became a national obsession shaped as much by class, mythology, and psychology as by forensic evidence. Scotland Yard continued examining leads, but as years passed without resolution, the possibility of locating Lukin alive gradually diminished. Still, the rumors never fully disappeared. Each new claimed sighting reopened old questions. Each anniversary of the murder revived media attention. And through it all, one haunting fact remained unchanged. After the night Sandra Rivet was murdered in the basement of 46 Lower Belgrave Street, Lord Lukin was never conclusively seen again. As the investigation stretched beyond its initial frantic weeks, British authorities faced an unusual and deeply frustrating reality. They believed they knew who was responsible for the death of Sandra Rivet, yet they could not place that man in a courtroom. Lord Lukin's disappearance had interrupted the normal progression of justice. In most homicide cases, police move from evidence collection to arrest, from arrest to prosecution, and ultimately toward a trial where facts are examined publicly before a judge and jury. The Lukin case stalled in the space between accusation and resolution. Veronica Lukin had identified her husband as the attacker. Physical evidence supported the occurrence of violent struggle inside the house. Sandra Rivet had been brutally murdered. Yet, because Lord Lukin vanished, the criminal process remained permanently incomplete. In 1975, a formal inquest into Sandra Rivet's death attempted to establish an official legal conclusion regarding responsibility for the killing. Unlike a criminal trial, the inquest did not function to determine criminal guilt beyond reasonable doubt in the same way a jury trial would. Instead, its purpose was to examine the circumstances surrounding Sandra's death and determine the most likely explanation based on available evidence. Still, the proceedings carried enormous public significance. Britain remained transfixed by the case. Newspapers followed every development closely, and the question hanging over the inquest was unavoidable. Would the official system openly identify Lord Lukin as Sandra Rivet's killer despite his absence? The evidence presented during the proceedings reflected the investigation's central conclusions. Veronica Lukin's testimony remained crucial. She maintained that she recognized her husband's voice during the attack and later saw his face, directly during the struggle inside the basement of the Belgravia home. Her account described violence, fear, and Lukin's alleged attempt to persuade her to help stage the scene after Sandra's death. Investigators also considered the physical evidence discovered at the house and within Lukin's abandoned Ford Corsair, The bloodstains, the bandages, the letters claiming innocence, and the timing of Lukin's disappearance all contributed to the broader picture authorities believed pointed toward his responsibility. At the center of the proceedings stood the grim reality of Sandra Rivet's death. Sandra was not a public figure or aristocrat. She was a working woman employed to care for children inside a troubled household. Yet her death became tied forever to one of Britain's most famous criminal mysteries. The violence inflicted upon her shocked investigators from the beginning. The brutality of the attack, combined with the possibility that she may have been mistaken for Veronica in the darkness, created a particularly disturbing interpretation of the crime. According to the dominant theory, Sandra died not because of anything she personally did, but because she happened to be present inside a house poisoned by escalating personal conflict. Ultimately, the inquest concluded that Lord Lucan was responsible for Sandra Rivet's murder. Officially, the British legal system accepted that conclusion despite the absence of a criminal trial. In practical terms, however, the ruling provided only partial closure. Lord Lucan had not been arrested. He had not faced cross-examination. There was no jury verdict delivered after adversarial trial proceedings. The findings established the official position of the authorities, but they could not resolve the deeper mystery created by his disappearance. That unresolved absence would continue haunting the case long after the inquest ended. One of the most unusual aspects of the Lord Lucan case is the way legal certainty and public uncertainty coexisted simultaneously. Officially, the inquest identified Lucan as the killer. Yet because no criminal trial occurred, some supporters and acquaintances of Lucan continued questioning aspects of the case for years afterward. His letters claiming innocence fueled lingering speculation among those unwilling to accept the official interpretation fully. In many ways, the disappearance itself complicated public understanding of guilt. Had Lucan remained in Britain and faced trial, the courtroom process would likely have produced a more definitive narrative in public memory, regardless of the outcome. Instead, the absence allowed uncertainty to survive indefinitely. For investigators and much of the public, Lucan's disappearance strongly implied consciousness of guilt. Innocent people accused of terrible crimes generally attempt to defend themselves publicly. They do not usually vanish forever. Yet, because he disappeared before facing prosecution, alternative theories continued emerging for decades. Some individuals insisted Lucan had panicked irrationally rather than intentionally fled justice. Others speculated that fear, confusion, or psychological collapse shaped his actions after the murder. But no explanation could erase the central fact that Sandra Rivet was dead and Lord Lucan had vanished immediately afterward. As years passed, the legal complications surrounding his disappearance deepened. Without confirmation of death, questions surrounding inheritance, titles, and estate matters remained difficult to resolve completely. Lord Lucan occupied a strange legal and social state, officially accused of murder, missing without trace, and neither fully alive nor definitively dead. Cases involving long-term disappearances often create complicated legal problems. But the Lucan case became particularly unusual because of his aristocratic title and public visibility. In 1999, decades after the murder, a court officially declared Lord Lucan presumed dead. By that stage, nearly 25 years had passed without any verified sighting or confirmed communication. Legally, the declaration represented recognition of practical reality. Whatever theories people continued discussing, the likelihood that Lucan remained secretly alive without detection had become increasingly remote in the eyes of the court. Yet even this legal step failed to eliminate public fascination. The declaration of presumed death did not answer how he died, where he died, or whether he escaped successfully for some period beforehand. It simply acknowledged that his continued absence made official recognition necessary. even after being declared presumed dead. Lord Lucan's case retained an unusual emotional power in British culture. Part of that power came from the unresolved nature of the disappearance itself, but another part came from the social symbolism attached to the story. The case represented the collapse of aristocratic image in a particularly dramatic form. Lord Lucan had once embodied upper-class confidence and glamour. By the end, his name became associated with violence, scandal, and disappearance. The transformation fascinated the public because it exposed the fragility hidden beneath wealth and privilege. The case also forced reflection on domestic violence and control within relationships. Though public discussion during the 1970s often approached such issues differently than modern audiences might today, Veronica Lucan's account portrayed a woman trapped inside escalating fear and instability long before the murder occurred. Her survival became central to the official narrative of the case. Yet living through the aftermath carried enormous personal consequences. For years afterward, Veronica remained publicly linked to one of Britain's most notorious criminal mysteries. She was not simply a witness. She was someone who survived violence inside her own home while simultaneously becoming part of a media obsession that never fully disappeared. Meanwhile, for Sandra Rivett's family, the absence of final resolution created a different kind of pain. Sandra et son Nil grew up in the shadow of a case that dominated national attention for decades. Yet for families connected to victims, public fascination rarely feels glamorous or mysterious. Instead, it prolongs grief. Each renewed media discussion, each alleged sighting of Lord Lucan, each anniversary documentary reopened emotional wounds tied to Sandra's death. In later years, Neil publicly pursued theories regarding Lucan's survival, particularly claims that he may have escaped to Australia. But like so many aspects of the case, these efforts never produced definitive proof. The emotional burden of uncertainty remained permanent. In 2016, more than 40 years after Sandra Rivett's murder, Lord Lucan's family finally obtained an official death certificate. Legally, this represented the final administrative acknowledgement of what the courts already recognized. John Bingham was considered dead. Yet the issuance of a death certificate did not end debate or speculation. By that point, the Lord Lucan mystery had become embedded deeply within British cultural memory. Books, documentaries, television dramas, and investigative programs continued revisiting the story repeatedly. The case endured because it combined several elements that create lasting fascination in public consciousness: aristocracy, violence, disappearance, and unresolved mystery. But perhaps the most striking aspect of the legal outcome is how incomplete it still feels even today. Officially, authorities concluded that Lord Lucan murdered Sandra Rivett. Officially, he was declared dead decades later. Yet emotionally and psychologically, the story resists closure because its most important unanswered question remains unresolved. What actually happened after Lord Lucan fled Lower Belgrave Street on the night of November 7th, 1974? Did he take his own life shortly afterward? Did wealthy friends secretly assist his escape? Did he spend years living under another identity somewhere far from Britain? Or did he die anonymously long before the rumors surrounding him began spreading internationally? No court ruling could answer those questions because the evidence necessary to resolve them conclusively never emerged. And so the legal conclusion of the case exists alongside enduring uncertainty. Sandra Rivett's death received official recognition as murder. Lord Lucan received official recognition as the responsible party. Yet the final chapter of the story disappeared with the man himself. In that sense, the Lord Lucan case became more than a criminal investigation. It became a permanent reminder that some mysteries survive not because evidence is entirely absent, but because the most crucial piece vanishes before the story can truly end. More than half a century has passed since the night Sandra Rivet was murdered inside the basement of 46 Lower Belgrave Street. Yet the Lord Lucan case continues to occupy a strange and powerful place in British cultural memory. Most criminal investigations eventually settle into history. Facts become fixed, legal conclusions are accepted, and public attention fades with time. The Lucan case never followed that pattern. Instead, it evolved into something larger than a murder investigation, part mystery, part social commentary, part national obsession. The reason lies not only in the violence of the crime itself, but in the extraordinary absence that followed it. Lord Lucan vanished before the story could fully end. And because he vanished, generations of people were left searching for meaning inside unanswered questions. In the decades following the murder, the public fascination surrounding Lucan only intensified. Newspapers repeatedly revisited the mystery whenever a new alleged sighting emerged. Television documentaries reconstructed the crime scene, examined theories, and interviewed investigators, acquaintances, and family members. Writers published books exploring every possible explanation for Lucan's disappearance. Dramatizations brought the story to new audiences unfamiliar with the original case. Productions such as Lucan and the Trial of Lord Lucan reflected how deeply the mystery had embedded itself within British storytelling culture. The case possessed all the elements that sustain long-term fascination: wealth, nobility, violence, psychological collapse, disappearance, and uncertainty. Yet beneath the public obsession existed a more uncomfortable truth. The mystery often overshadowed the human tragedy at the center of the story. Sandra Rivet's death sometimes became secondary in public imagination to the legend of the missing aristocrat. That imbalance reveals something important about society's relationship with crime stories. Mystery tends to attract more attention than grief. The image of a vanished lord hiding somewhere in the world captured imaginations far more easily than the reality of an ordinary working woman whose life ended violently while doing her job. But when the mythology surrounding Lord Lucan is stripped away, the core tragedy remains painfully simple. Sandra Rivet entered the Lucan household as a nanny and caretaker. She became trapped inside a collapsing family situation marked by fear, resentment, instability, and conflict that had nothing to do with her personally. Investigators believed she may have been mistaken for Veronica Lucan in the darkness of the basement. If true, Sandra died because she happened to be standing in the wrong place during a moment shaped by another person's rage and desperation. Her death was not part of some glamorous aristocratic mystery. It was an act of devastating violence that permanently destroyed a family and traumatized everyone connected to the household. Veronica Lucan carried a different kind of burden after surviving the attack. Long after the headlines faded, she remained linked forever to the events of November 7th, 1974. Publicly, she became one of the central voices defining the case because she identified Lord Lucan as the attacker and survived the assault herself. But survival inside famous criminal cases often carries its own form of imprisonment. Veronica lived for decades under the shadow of a story that Britain never stopped discussing. Every new documentary, every newspaper anniversary piece, every reported sighting of Lord Lucan forced the events of that night back into public conversation. While outsiders debated theories and possibilities, Veronica lived with the memory of violence inside her own home and the trauma of escaping a man she believed intended to kill her. For Sandra Rivet's family, especially her son Neil Berriman, the enduring fascination with Lord Lucan created another painful contradiction. The public remained captivated by the missing aristocrat. But for the victim's family, there was never anything entertaining or mysterious about the case. Neil grew up knowing that his mother's murder had become part of one of Britain's most famous criminal legends. Over time, he himself pursued theories regarding Lucan's possible survival, particularly claims suggesting the missing aristocrat may have escaped to Australia. Yet even those efforts reflected the emotional difficulty of unresolved grief. In many cases involving disappearances, families continue searching not because evidence strongly supports survival, but because uncertainty itself becomes impossible to fully accept. Without definitive proof of death, the mind continues imagining possibilities. That psychological tension helped keep the Lucan mystery alive across generations. The case also left a broader cultural impact on British society because it exposed anxieties surrounding privilege and class. Lord Lucan represented the old aristocratic establishment, educated at Eton, connected to elite social clubs, protected by wealth and social status. When he disappeared so successfully after being accused of murder, many people questioned whether privilege itself had made the escape possible. The suspicion that wealthy friends may have assisted Lucan never fully disappeared from public discussion. Some believed aristocratic loyalty and access to resources allowed him to evade justice in ways impossible for ordinary suspects. Whether true or not, the theory resonated because it reflected wider public discomfort about unequal power within society. The Lucan case, therefore, became more than a mystery about one missing man. It became a symbolic story about the collapse of aristocratic respectability and the fear that wealth could shield individuals from accountability. At the same time, the case highlighted the destructive consequences of gambling addiction and emotional instability. Lord Lucan's public image once centered on charm, confidence, and success. Lucky Lucan appeared to embody effortless upper-class sophistication. But behind that image, financial pressure and personal collapse were steadily intensifying. Gambling debts mounted. His marriage deteriorated. His emotional behavior reportedly became more volatile. The distance between public appearance and private reality widened until it eventually shattered. Looking back, the Lord Lucan story feels partly like the collapse of a carefully constructed identity. The polished aristocrat admired within gambling clubs and social circles transformed into a fugitive, accused of murder. In that transformation lies one of the case's deepest psychological themes: the danger of lives built entirely around image, control, and reputation. There's also something uniquely haunting about disappearances themselves. Human beings struggle emotionally with unfinished endings. Death, however painful, provides certainty. A criminal conviction establishes official judgment. But disappearance creates a permanent absence that resists closure. In a Lucan case, that absence became almost mythological. Because no body was ever found, every theory remained possible to some degree. Some people remained convinced he committed suicide shortly after the murder, perhaps by jumping from a ferry into the English Channel. Others believed equally strongly that he escaped successfully with assistance from wealthy friends. Still others imagined him growing old quietly somewhere abroad under another name. The mystery survived precisely because none of those explanations could ever be fully proven or completely dismissed. Even after Lord Lucan was officially declared presumed dead in 1999, and later issued a formal death certificate in 2016, public fascination did not disappear. Legal closure and emotional closure are not the same thing. Official documents could acknowledge probability, but they could not reveal the truth of what happened after Lucan fled into the night. Did he spend his final hours overwhelmed by panic and guilt? Did he carefully plan an escape route before the attack ever occurred? Did someone help him disappear? Or did the truth vanish permanently within the darkness surrounding those final hours after Sandra? Rivet's death? Those questions continue surviving because the evidence necessary to answer them conclusively no longer exists, if it ever existed at all. Perhaps that is why the Lord Lucan case continues resonating with audiences decades later. It reflects several fears simultaneously. The fear that violence can exist behind respectable appearances. The fear that wealth and status can conceal instability. The fear that justice sometimes remains incomplete. And perhaps most unsettling of all, the fear that a human being can disappear so completely that even history cannot fully recover the truth. Yet after all the speculation, theories, documentaries, and headlines, the case ultimately returns to one quiet reality. On the night of November 7th, 1974, a woman named Sandra Rivet lost her life inside the home where she worked. Veronica Lucan escaped an attack she believed was intended to kill her. 3 children became permanently connected to a tragedy that would follow them forever. And one man, once among the most recognizable aristocrats in Britain, vanished without explanation. In the end, the mystery of Lord Lucan may never be solved completely. Perhaps he died shortly after the murder. Perhaps he escaped farther than anyone imagined. Perhaps the final truth disappeared with him forever. But the lasting power of the case does not come only from the unanswered question of where Lord Lucan went. It comes from the unsettling realization that beneath the elegance of aristocratic London, beneath the polished manners and social prestige, existed fear, violence, desperation, and human fragility no different from anywhere else. The title of Lord could not prevent collapse. Wealth could not stop tragedy. Reputation could not erase blood from the basement floor of Lower Belgrave Street. And after more than 50 years, Britain is still left staring into the same darkness that opened on that November night, wondering what became of the man who walked into it and was never seen again. There is a moment in nearly every unsolved case when the facts end and something else begins. Evidence gives way to interpretation. Official records give way to rumor. Witness statements slowly become legend. In the story of Lord Lucan, that transformation happened with unusual speed. By the late 1970s, only a few years after Sandra Rivet's murder, the case had already drifted beyond ordinary criminal investigation and entered the realm of national mythology. Lord Lucan was no longer simply a missing suspect. He had become an idea, the vanished aristocrat, the fugitive who escaped the modern world, the ghost moving somewhere beyond the reach of law and certainty. And perhaps that is why the case still feels unfinished even today. The mystery survived not because there was no evidence at all, but because the final chapter was never witnessed by anyone. No confirmed death, no verificação de escape, no confession, no body, only silence. Yet silence has a strange effect on public imagination. People tend to fill empty spaces with stories. And few empty spaces in British criminal history have been larger than the disappearance of Lord Lucan. In the years following the murder, reported sightings became almost routine. Someone would claim to have recognized Lucan in a foreign city. Another person would insist they encountered him living quietly under a false name. The story spread across continents: South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, India, Brazil. Each rumor carried the same emotional appeal: the possibility that the missing lord had somehow survived, reinvented himself, and continued existing beyond the boundaries of the life he destroyed. Most of the sightings collapsed quickly under scrutiny, but their persistence revealed how deeply the mystery had entered public consciousness. People wanted the story to continue because unresolved mysteries create a form of psychological tension that never fully relaxes. Every alleged sighting offered temporary relief from uncertainty. Every failed lead reopened the wound again. Over time, Lord Lucan became less like a historical figure and more like a modern folk legend. Some imagined him hiding among wealthy expatriates protected by old aristocratic connections. Others pictured him alone and isolated, carrying the weight of guilt somewhere far from Britain. A few even romanticized the disappearance itself, treating it almost like the plot of a thriller novel rather than the aftermath of real violence. That romanticization disturbed many observers because it obscured the suffering left behind by the crime. Sandra Rivet remained dead. Veronica Lukin survived profound trauma. Families were shattered permanently. Yet public fascination increasingly centered not on the victim or the survivors, but on the missing man. This imbalance says something uncomfortable about society's attraction to mystery. People are often drawn more strongly toward questions than answers, toward disappearance more than grief. The image of a fugitive aristocrat surviving in secret proved more seductive to public imagination than the ordinary reality of loss experienced by Sandra Rivet's family. But behind the mythology, the case remained rooted in violence and fear. When stripped of speculation and legend, the essential facts remained devastatingly human. A marriage had collapsed under pressure, resentment, and instability. Gambling addiction and financial strain intensified emotional deterioration. Veronica Lukin reportedly lived in fear of her estranged husband. Sandra Rivet entered the household simply to care for children and help manage domestic life during a difficult period. Then, on a cold November evening in 1974, everything exploded into irreversible tragedy. In many ways, the Lord Lukin story became symbolic of something larger than one crime. It exposed the illusion that wealth and social status create emotional stability or moral superiority. British aristocracy traditionally projected images of composure, discipline, and refinement. Lord Lukin himself embodied that image publicly for years. Educated at Eton, connected to elite clubs, charming within upper-class society, he appeared to represent inherited confidence and control. Yet behind that appearance, his life was steadily unraveling. Debt, humiliation, anger, and instability grew beneath the polished exterior until the contradiction could no longer be contained. The violence at Lower Belgrave Street shattered not only a family, but also a cultural illusion about class and respectability. One reason the case continues resonating decades later is because it reminds people how little outsiders truly know about private lives hidden behind respectable appearances. Neighbors may see elegance. Friends may see charm. Society may see success. But beneath those surfaces, desperation and fear can grow unnoticed until catastrophe finally reveals them. The Lord Lukin case, therefore, carries a haunting duality. On one level, it is a mystery about disappearance. On another, it is a story about collapse, the collapse of marriage, identity, image, and control. There is also a deeper question buried within the public obsession surrounding Lukin himself. Why are people so fascinated by disappearances that remain unresolved? Part of the answer may lie in the fear of incompleteness. Human beings seek narratives with endings because endings create emotional order. A body confirms death. A conviction confirms responsibility. But disappearance interrupts narrative structure itself. The story becomes permanently suspended. The missing person exists in a strange state between life and death, reality and imagination. Lord Lukin occupied that suspended state for decades. Officially, he was declared presumed dead in 1999. Legally, a death certificate followed in 2016. Yet emotionally, many people never accepted finality because no definitive truth accompanied those declarations. The legal system could acknowledge probability, but probability is not the same as certainty. And so the speculation survived. Even today, people continue debating what became of Lord Lukin after he fled London. Some still believe suicide remains the most logical explanation. According to that theory, Lucan, overwhelmed by panic and realizing the magnitude of what had happened, crossed toward the English Channel and ended his life shortly afterward. Others continue believing wealthy friends helped him escape the country. That theory persists partly because Lucan's social connections appeared extensive enough to make assistance conceivable. If ordinary fugitives struggle to disappear successfully, perhaps aristocratic privilege changed the equation. Another possibility remains that Lucan survived abroad for years under another identity, though no evidence has ever conclusively supported that idea. In truth, the enduring power of the mystery comes from the fact that each explanation feels possible while none feels complete. Yet perhaps the most important lesson of the case lies not in the mystery itself, but in the people left behind. Sandra Rivett's life is often overshadowed in retellings dominated by the disappearance of Lord Lucan. But she remains the central victim of the story. She was not a symbol or character in a mystery narrative. She was a real woman whose life ended violently inside the house where she worked. The fascination surrounding Lucan's disappearance should never erase that reality. Veronica Lucan also occupies a complicated place within the story. She survived the attack, identified her husband publicly, and then spent decades living alongside the shadow of one of Britain's most famous criminal cases. Survival does not end trauma. In many ways, it extends it. Every new documentary, every anniversary article, every fresh rumor about Lord Lucan's fate reopened public attention surrounding the worst night of her life. The psychological burden of surviving such an event while remaining permanently attached to a national mystery is difficult to fully comprehend. And then there are the children, often overlooked in public discussion, yet deeply connected to the tragedy. They lost not only the stability of family life, but also any possibility of anonymity. Their father became Britain's most famous missing fugitive. Their home became a notorious crime scene. Their childhood became inseparable from public scandal and speculation. The emotional consequences of that reality likely extended across lifetimes. Perhaps this is why the Lord Lucan case continues feeling so haunting even after more than 50 years. It is not simply a puzzle waiting to be solved. It is a story about absence in every sense of the word. The absence of certainty. The absence of justice fully completed. The absence of emotional closure. And literally, the absence of the man whose disappearance transformed tragedy into legend. In the end, maybe the final truth about Lord Lucan no longer matters as much as the shadow left behind by his disappearance. The mystery became part of British cultural consciousness because it touched something deeply unsettling. The idea that a person can vanish so completely that even history cannot recover them. Modern society depends heavily on the belief that everything leaves traces, that every crime eventually resolves in facts, that no one disappears forever. The Lord Lucan case challenges that belief. Somewhere between the basement of Lower Belgrave Street and the endless theories that followed afterward, certainty itself disappeared. And perhaps that is the most haunting part of all. A woman lost her life. Another barely escaped with hers. A man vanished into darkness. And decades later, Britain is still searching that darkness for an ending that never came.